I wanted to talk about a controversial topic, and this is something that I've um, really had a good journey with back in the late 80s as far as, when does the actual whitetail rut begin every single year? Now, for hunting wise, I've always relied on the weather and that roller coaster of the weather patterns. When we extend forward here into the rut, it's October 21st right now, then I'm going to hunt the roller coaster of the weather, and it's not that the weather is pushing these does into estrus. It's just that the weather to me signifies and can define exactly when you can pick out high value days in the weather forecast and in the upcoming 10 to 14 days out. And yes, you can see it that far out. Those major weather changes and temperature drops, you can see a long ways out, and you can start to plan. And it might be 10 days out, it might be within a day or two, but something's coming. And that's how I hunt. I've hunted like that since the early 90s, late 80s, and it's brought me a lot of success every single year, and I've really enjoyed that. But part of that success and part of knowing when to actually go out to a tree stand, other than the weather, is the timing of the annual whitetail rut. And what's really cool about the whitetail rut is that, I started this kind of a journey, like I said, where I got into the late 90s, and I looked at it like, geez, you had those certain dates where just things started to happen every single year. The moon phase books and moon phase literature started coming out, and it's really interesting because you could look at it and say, yeah, you could make a case that the moon is what spurns on the whitetail rut, and that's where it begins. I was very fortunate in the late 90s, early 2000s to run into a guy named John Azoga. He's the foremost deer research biologist in the entire country. He's the most quoted deer research biologist in the entire country. I believe he has over 100 peer-reviewed articles in association with a couple other guys that he worked with too. And I could be wrong on the numbers on that, but to say that he is the most major expert of deer research biology is probably an understatement. He's research editor for Deer and Deer Hunting for a number of years. Anyways, he was up in Munising where I lived, and I was able to have a lot of conversations in the living room, around the kitchen table. And one thing he told me, he said, with their research, and whether it was hundreds or thousands of ultrasounded does, car hit, whatever it might be, where they could actually look at that fawn and that fetus inside that doe, and they could go right back to the date of conception, no different than a human. And he said out of those decades of research that they had, and this is hard numbers, and this has also been complemented around the country with other research too, that the rut and the date of those conception of those fawns takes place at the same time every single year. In fact, when they look at a center point, I think it was November 13th up in the UP in Michigan, then all the breeding took place, 80% of it within 10 days on either side of that. And there was no difference year by year based on the moon or anything else. The timing, now if it was bad weather, he said they just breed at night. And so that was a real eye-opener for me in the late 90s, early 2000s. And knowing that for here in Wisconsin, southwest Wisconsin, southern Michigan, the pre-rut begins. I look at like when you start having those cold front days and that roller coaster of cold front starts and begins after the 20th of October, then I'm in a tree stand. We were out here October 21st because there's a 15-degree temperature drop from yesterday to today. We had 5 bucks cruise by. We had an outstanding morning, and just happened to be some of the younger bucks, but boy, we had just good a chance of seeing one of those older bucks, 4, 5, 6 years old. Bottom line is, I know when it gets to October 20th every year and we start to get those cold fronts, obviously if it's 80 degrees and really windy, why would those bucks be very active during the day? We had a morning like this where it's probably still in the 30s. It started out at 25. It's probably still in the 30s by 10 o'clock in the morning. We saw bucks an hour into light and all the way up to 3 hours into first light. And then we had a doe and fawn come by at 4 hours. So we had deer activity for the first 4 hours of daylight, and we had an incredible pre-rut hunt. No, does are not coming into estrus right now, but the bucks are getting ready. And when you have these cold temperatures in the morning, I hunt them. The pre-rut starts and begins at this time in this location every single year the same. Now sometimes you don't see a lot of activity on a property. It's just because you don't have a lot of older bucks on the property. I find those older bucks, for one, it's been proven they make a lot more rubs and scrapes, hundreds of rubs and scrapes a year. compared to yearling bucks that might make a couple dozen at the most. And so when you start to see all that combination of sign pop up in the woods and you have those mature bucks in your area, then you can count on that pre-rut being very active. And that explains why 2 miles away, someone else is saying, oh, the rut's not started yet. And I hate those rut watches across the country because, you know, this person over here that has mature bucks, they're starting in the end of October. This person over here that doesn't have any mature bucks has to wait for them to cruise from someone else's property during the peak rut. There could be a timing window of two weeks, you know, up to 20 days where this person's saying, yeah, the rut started, this person's saying the rut hasn't started. Folks, pre-rut starts at the same time every year in your location, wherever it might be. I find that southern Ohio, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, pre-rut begins more the end of October as opposed to maybe the 21st, 22nd, meaning that the bucks are very active. And as you get into that peak rut, where a large number of does are beginning to be bred, that takes place 7th, 8th, 10th in November here, in November in southwest Wisconsin. And that date might be more the 10th, 12th, 14th of November in southern Indiana, southern Illinois. Bottom line, same timing in your location every single year. Once you know that, then folks follow the weather, follow the roller coaster of the weather, and follow those cold fronts. I have a new book that's out, All Weather Whitetails, and I've been placing these forecasts on social media for many years. And you know, finally came out with this book. I should have done it a few years ago. But you can use the weather to guide you to success, especially when you know that the timing of the rut is the exact same time every single hunting season.